Alrighty, Jose Rodriguez back again. I touched on this on one of my recent Sunday live streams. The subject of photos fading, and that's kind of a important subject out there, especially those of you who are not using original inks, which are basically rated for the maximum longevity that you can possibly get. You can get away with using third-party inks on certain paper printer combinations. Paper seems to be extremely important in how long a print will last. And in this case, we're not even discussing exposure to atmospheric gases. We're just talking about light. And so, what better source to go to but Aardenburg Imaging Group? And so, we're going to take a very quick look at some of the results. They have many results. Basically, the process, I have actually done some work for them when Precisioncolors wanted to have some of their inks tested. Well, considering the fact that these were dye inks, of course they did not perform as well as the highly rated, say, Pro-100 ChromaLife Plus inks. They basically lasted about a tenth. They were able to withstand about a tenth of the amount of light required to begin to show any measurable fading effects on certain papers. But let's look at some really interesting results here that'll kind of blow your mind, because I never realized that there will be such a large discrepancy in fade results from something like the Pro-1000 using original inks and on Canon Photo Paper Pro Luster LU-101 and Moab Entrada Rag Natural 300 GSM, as well as Red River Palo Duro Soft Gloss Rag, one of my favorite papers. So let's jump into the screen and I will walk you through this. Alright, so as you can see, this is the Aardenburg Imaging and Archives page, and what you do is you enter a printer and see what they have. In other words, if they did some testing, it will show up. Often, you have to be careful how you word it. So in this case, I was able to get away with Pro-1000. Sometimes you're not. So Pro-1000 has 3 tests that they perform on the original inks, that is, using original inks. So here's a Canon Lucia Pro-11 inks, Pro Luster, the most common paper that we'll probably use. I use it all the time. Produced prints that began to fade after 7.9 to 18 megalux hours of exposure. Now, the way they do this, I believe that they have these arc lights. They have a like a light box that has a arc light source, and that then they know exactly how much light or level lux wise. Again, that goes way above my learning scale, if you will. And so they know they can control the amount of light. And so they know that after 7.9 to 18 megalux exposure, it began to show measurable effects. In other words, they need to use something like this, actually more advanced than this, to measure the patches. The way that they start out is they print using that particular printer paper ink combination a set of patches. They're very similar to the ones that we used to create profiles with, and those patches are composed of colors and hues that are known, so they know what the values are. They make a control print. They store that in the dark, complete pitch black conditions, and also sealed from gas and any kind of light. And then the second set is then used in their exposure box to then bombard it with light to see how long it takes for the first measurable fading effect to take place. So once they are able to detect a certain amount of fade, that's when they then come up with the, I guess this maybe represents a minimum, and I don't know, 7.9 to 18 seems to be quite a wide gap, so I don't know how they do that. But anyway, that gives you kind of a rough idea of how long it takes to caused some fading with Canon ProLuster paper Pro-1000 using the Canon Lucia Pro-11 inks. Now, take a look at the Moab Entrada. Now, I'm not too familiar with that one, and I don't know whether that is a Burita paper or not, but you can see how well that paper did. Moab Entrada rag, natural 300 GSM, no coating. Oh, by the way, none of the papers had any kind of coating, whether it's a spray or a laminate applied. But take a look at that. 126 to 175 megalux hours before it began to show any fading. So the discrepancy is huge. Let's divide 18 into 175 and see what happens. See what we get. So 175. Let me put this above me here. 175 divided by 18. That's the maximum. So that is nearly 10 times as much, or so-called longevity, just by changing the paper, just by using this paper rather than Canon photo paper ProLuster. Now, that is a resin coated paper. I assume it has OBAs, and I assume this does not. Okay, I assume this is a super high quality gallery level type fine art paper. Let's look at the Red River Palo Duro. I love that paper. It's also a rag based paper, 51 to 65. So now we're talking about a third of this life expectancy. Okay, but still a lot better than the Canon paper. Wow, so that's really, really interesting in the way this has worked out in a way, because a lot of us thought that Canon ProLuster would be a really good choice to print for any reason. Now, you got to ask yourself, well, how does this relate to a real world fade rating? Let's just call it that. Longevity. How does that relate to, say, a photo hanging on my living room wall? How many years is that supposed to relate to? Say I even mount it on their glass, UV glass, and even the cheapest glass will block a certain amount of UV, and if you keep it sealed away from any kind of gases, our atmospheric ozone, of course, that will play havoc with dye inks, not so much with pigment inks, but still. How does that translate to a real life type results? Will this outlive me? How many years of exposure in my living room wall does that equate to? How many years of exposure does this one equate to? Really, it's very difficult to answer that. But this kind of a laboratory level type result, if this lasts almost 10 times longer, imagine, even at the lowest rating, this is a huge difference in fade. Okay, so that is one of the more interesting results that I was able to see, and I decided to then check out the Canon PIXMA Pro 100. And again, this is just original inks. The same thing applies here as well, folks. Incredible differences in the length of time that it takes to basically cause fade to begin to show up. In other words, to be able to be measured. And look what they did here. So let's talk about this top result here. So Canon Chroma Life 100 plus, Canon Photo Paper plus Glossy. So that's their common 101 plus glossy paper. And they sprayed it with Premier Art Print Shield, which I have. They were able to get 60 megalux hour exposure before any fade began to show up. This is dye ink. Red River Ultra Pro Satin, no coating, only 8.2. So this is a resin coated paper, presumably with OBAs, just like some of these may be. I don't know about the Canon Photo Paper Glossy Plus, but I know this one may have OBAs. Now we jump right over to, this is amazing right here. So remember, this was treated with Premier Art Print Shield. Now, Canon Photo Paper ProLuster, remember the one that did not do so well, with pigment inks. How in the hell, excuse my French, were they able to get 57 megalux hours exposure before any fade occurred with dye inks? That's a strange one. That is a mystery to me. Canon Photo Paper Semi-Gloss. Again, very, very long exposure before you end up with some fading. platinum, and this is top quality, and it has a less capacity before the fading begins to show up. Canon Photo Paper Plus Glossy 2. This is the same one they use on the top, which they treated with a print shield, 23 to 48. Okay. Epson Proofing Paper, white semi-matte. Never used it before in my life, 28 to 40. So again, it's really weird. Again, I don't know how you translate any of this to a real world type length of time, let's just say, considering the fact that wherever you put up your finished prints, whatever wall you choose to put it, the amount of light falling upon it on a daily basis will differ greatly, as will the amount of exposure to gases involved in the atmosphere, or gases that will oxidize, say, dye inks, for instance. So again, I don't know how that translates to real world results. 3880, so that's one of the most famous printers, 17-inch printers that Epson put out. And here's a whole boatload of results here. I'm going to concentrate on the ones with the highest rating. So this is with, of course, with Epson OEM inks. Kerno Coatings Ltd. Art Fabric. That's an interesting one. 119 hours. Again, we're not going to concentrate on these. I think these are probably canvases. Let's just skip those. Hanamill Photo Rag Ultra Smooth. Again, okay, that's pretty good. I don't know how many years that equates to under normal lighting conditions. Again, who knows? Okay, this is... Oh, okay. Here's the difference. I just saw a huge discrepancy here in the Megalux hours. Same printer, same paper. Here they are printing ABW, which means advanced black and white. So that means that it's only using your blacks, your grays, and a little bit of the other colors to help neutralize the results. So since your blacks are, in most cases, are made out of carbon particles, again, probably no fade at all. What I recommend you guys do is take a look at this, go to their site, and just spend some time exploring all of these results, and it's quite an eye-opener. Moab Somerset Enhanced Velvet. Again, that exceeds anything. For example, go back to the Pro-1000 and Canon ProLuster. That way exceeds that result. And I have ProLuster prints that are going to be 5 years old that look exactly like they were when I printed them. So again, real world. I would like to see a real world result of these paper ink combinations. Let's look at one last one. We get into some older printers here. Let me remove these tabs. Epson 1270. Now that was a dog. Okay, that printer came out. I immediately fell in love with it. It used 2 cartridges. One cartridge contained 5 colors. So basically it had 5 sponges internally, 5 compartments, with yellow, light and regular magenta, light and regular cyan, and then you had a separate black cartridge. The inks faded like crazy. So it only took 3 to 4 megalux hour for heavyweight matte. Epson Color Life photo paper, I don't remember that paper at all, 2 to 4 megalux hours. So yeah, that means that in a few months, under most conditions at home, you would begin to see fading. Now, let's look at some newer printers. The 1400 introduced so-called Claria ink. Yeah, look at that. That increased the amount of longevity quite a lot compared to these early results. There was a lot of controversy involved with that, and the company basically refused to acknowledge that that ink set did have a problem. It was more of a combination of the inks and the papers that were available back in those days. All right, so that's it. It goes on and on and on and on. I just basically picked a couple of categories here. So again, if you want to have a really good time checking all of this information, just go to Aardenburg. That's Aardenburg Imaging, and you will be able to just spend hours and just look at all of this different results. And they have some other types of results that are more lab oriented, they're way over my head, and I just really do not know what they're talking about, to be truthful with you. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this. Again, remember, on the Pro 1000, for instance, it depends on the paper, as you saw earlier. Okay, so that will probably apply to just about any printer combination. Certain papers just have the ability to just last longer. All right, I hope you enjoyed this. It's kind of boring, long hair type information, but I find it fascinating because it allows you to then make a good choice of a combination of particular paper, inks, and a printer that will give you the best and most long-lasting results out there. All right, that is it for now. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like. And as always, happy printing, everybody, and bye-bye.